The night air hung thick and still outside our second-floor apartment in Oakwood Estates, a quiet suburban complex just outside Columbus, where the streetlights cast long, lonely shadows across manicured lawns. My wife Sarah and I had lived there for 3 years, renting this 2-bedroom unit with its beige walls and generic furnishings. I worked as a mid-level accountant downtown, punctual with spreadsheets but tragically lax with our front door lock. Sarah taught 3rd grade, her classroom discipline never quite translating to our domestic life. We'd fallen into what she called our reckless rhythm, coming home exhausted, dumping keys on the entryway table, and collapsing onto the couch without turning the deadbolt. Mornings always began the same way. Sarah discovering the unlocked door, her voice tight with frustration as sunlight streamed through the blinds. "Alex, how can you be so careless?" she'd say, arms crossed over her robe. "We talked about this last week. What if someone walked in? A burglar or worse. Some strung-out addict looking for quick cash." Her brown eyes would flash with a mix of fear and anger, her practical nature clashing with my habitual forgetfulness. I'd shrug it off, blaming late nights or fatigue. But the truth was simpler. I'd grown up in a sleepy Indiana town where doors stayed unlocked all summer, and that false sense of security clung to me like old lint. One humid Tuesday, the tension peaked. Around 2 a.m., a gust of wind blew the door wide open, hinges groaning like a wounded animal. We'd both bolted upright in bed, hearts hammering, convinced an intruder stood in the hallway. It was just the storm, of course. Rain lashing the windows while we laughed nervously, clutching each other under the covers. But even that scare didn't break the cycle. Sarah started eyeing pepper spray ads online, muttering about self-defense classes. "A home's a fortress, Alex," she'd say. "Walls mean nothing if you leave the gates wide open." I'd nod, promise to do better, and forget by sunset. The change came on a moonless Friday in late October. The air had turned crisp, carrying the scent of decaying leaves from the oak trees lining our parking lot. We'd spent the evening grading papers side by side on the couch, Sarah correcting math worksheets, me reconciling quarterly reports, before shuffling off to bed around 11. Sleep eluded me. Tension prickled along my spine, a nagging unease that had nothing to do with work. Beside me, Sarah breathed evenly, her face peaceful in the gloom. Our bedroom door stood ajar, revealing a sliver of the hallway where shadows pooled thick and deep. Around 3 a.m., the compulsion hit, a visceral itch between my shoulder blades demanding I check the door. I tried ignoring it, burying my face in the pillow, but the thought crystallized with terrifying clarity. What if it's unlocked again? Groaning, I slid out of bed, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. The hallway stretched before me, illuminated only by the faint glow of a digital clock from the living room. I padded forward, the silence so complete I could hear the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. When I reached the entryway, I pressed my palm against the solid oak door. It swung inward a fraction with no resistance. My stomach dropped. Damn it, not again. Sarah's disappointed frown flashed in my mind. Gritting my teeth, I turned the primary deadbolt. 4 full rotations until it thudded home. Then, for reasons I couldn't explain, I reached for the secondary lock beneath it. A heavy, old-fashioned bolt we'd never once used since moving in. The landlord had joked it was overkill from the paranoid 70s. The mechanism rasped as I slid it across, metal grinding against metal. Satisfied, I took 2 steps back toward the bedroom. That's when the sounds began. First, a soft, sliding whisper against the outer surface of the door, like fingertips dragging slowly across grainy wood. Not a knock, not a scratch. It was exploratory, almost tender, as if someone blindfolded had stumbled against the barrier and was mapping its contours. I froze, breath catching in my throat. The air turned icy, sharp enough to prickle my skin. My pulse throbbed in my temples, but this wasn't the clean spike of fear. It was deeper, heavier, a suffocating dread that settled in my chest like a stone, making my heart ache with a dull, mournful throb. I forced myself to turn, creeping back to the door on silent feet. Peering through the fisheye peephole, I saw nothing but the empty landing and the dim glow of the stairwell emergency light. Then the brass handle began to jiggle. Not a rattle, but deliberate, disjointed movements, up, down, up again, as if testing its give. A second later, knuckles rapped against the wood. Tap, tap, tap. Pause, tap, tap, tap. The rhythm was all wrong, arrhythmic and jarring, like Morse code from a broken transmitter. Cold sweat slicked my palms. That heavy, formless terror swelled, turning my limbs to lead. Behind me, floorboards creaked. Sarah stood in the bedroom doorway, her silhouette backlit by the clock's glow. "Alex?" she whispered, voice thick with sleep. "What's—" I raised a finger to my lips, the universal sign for silence. Her eyes widened, instantly alert. She knew. In 7 years of marriage, she'd learned to read my stillness like a warning siren. She padded forward, barefoot and shivering, her hand finding mine. Her skin was clammy. That's when I remembered the camera. My younger brother Mike, who worked corporate security for a Cleveland firm, had gifted it to us last Christmas. A sleek, high-definition unit mounted discreetly above our doorframe, wired to a live feed on my laptop. "For peace of mind," he'd said, grinning as he installed it. We'd tested it twice, waved at ourselves from the landing, then forgotten it existed. Now it felt like a lifeline. I tugged Sarah toward the living room, our movements synchronized in breathless silence. The laptop sat on the coffee table amid scattered reports. I lifted the lid, the screen flaring to life, and navigated to the security app. The feed loaded, grainy at first, then sharpening to show the concrete landing outside our door. Sarah's grip on my hand tightened to the point of pain. "Oh God," she breathed, the words barely audible. The creature was crouched low on all fours, its back to the camera. It was wrapped in shredded, dirt-caked fabric that might once have been a coat or blanket, the cloth hanging in stiff, dark ribbons. Beneath the rags, matted fur covered twisted limbs that bent at unnatural angles. Too long for a human, too articulated for a beast. Its head swung slowly side to side, revealing a grotesque profile, a distorted muzzle fused with something vaguely human, one milky eye visible beneath a tangle of coarse, greasy hair. It wasn't a wolf, wasn't a dog. The word werewolf flickered in my mind, but this thing felt older, stranger, a nightmare given form. It crawled, spider-like, joints popping with each movement, pausing to press a distorted ear against Mrs. Henderson's door across the hall. A low, wet, sniffing sound emanated from it, audible even through the laptop's tinny speakers. The stench of damp earth and decay seemed to seep through the walls. It pivoted, swinging its head toward our door, and I stifled a gasp. Its face was a horror show, a lipless mouth lined with needle-sharp teeth, the milky eye now fixed on our peephole. It crept closer, rag-wrapped limbs scuttling across concrete until it filled the screen. One clawed hand, more talon than finger, rose to scrape gently down the wood. Then it leaned in, pressing its face against the door, inhaling deeply through ragged nostrils. Sarah trembled violently beside me, tears streaming down her cheeks. She clamped her free hand over her mouth, knuckles white. I wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close, my own eyes burning. Inside, I chanted silent pleas. Go away, just go away. As the creature lingered, motionless for an eternity. Finally, it pulled back. With agonizing slowness, it turned and crawled toward the stairs, its distorted body vanishing step by step into the gloom. We watched, paralyzed, until the feed showed only empty concrete. Outside, the first gray light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in bruised hues of purple and pink. The emergency light flickered and died. We didn't move until the sun fully rose, spilling weak light through the blinds. Sarah's crying had subsided into silent shudders. We're leaving, she said hoarsely, her voice raw. Today, Alex. I won't sleep another night here. I nodded, numb. The apartment was leased month to month anyway, a temporary solution that had overstayed its welcome. As we packed boxes in a frenzy that afternoon, I couldn't shake the image of that twisted face pressed against the door. What if I'd ignored the urge to check the lock? What if I'd skipped the second bolt? Would it have shouldered its way in? Found us huddled in bed? The possibilities unspooled in gory detail. Blood on the walls. Silence where Sarah's breath should be. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed. But ours. That night, we locked them all.